At issue this week, 2 more federal party leaders have now seen the unredacted report suggesting some parliamentarians were working with foreign actors. Jagmeet Singh is expressing alarm.
I am more convinced than ever of the conclusions of the Antikop Committee and the report that some parliamentarians are witting participants in the efforts of foreign states.
While Green Party leader Elizabeth May says she's relieved.
There is no list of MPs who have shown disloyalty to Canada.
So how should we square those two conclusions? And should the Conservative leader be briefed? Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Let's bring in our at-issue panelists, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Rush. Good to see you all. Still talking about this report. Of course, the difference now, Singh and May have both seen this unredacted report, but come to quite different conclusions. And I wonder what we're supposed to do with that, Chantal. What are Canadians who are sort of following this supposed to make of these different responses?
At the very least, the government that is leading this file, because it is the government that is showing an absence of leadership. It's allowing this debate to go left, right, and center. There is no sense that it's being taken seriously. I think people watching from the outside will say, well, how can treason, because Mr. Singh did use the word, be in the eye of the beholder?
Yeah.
Both of them are experienced parliamentarians. They do agree that foreign interference is a serious problem and serious things are happening. But for Canadians to watch the spectacle of those 2 news conferences is bound to just generate more confusion about whether anyone in Parliament is serious about this.
And it's confusing because they can't really go too far in what they can say either, Andrew. Like, they're limited in how much they can divulge. So they're giving sort of their impressions or their feelings about something as opposed to information.
Yeah, I will say I think Mr. Singh's interpretation is a little closer to the plain sense of what the committee reported. If the committee had meant to say no sitting MP did anything wittingly, I think they would have said so. And in fact, the whole report talks about wittingly, knowingly, deliberately, and the only person they mentioned as a past MP was the one person who had gone the furthest in terms of actually, going to a foreign country and trying to meet with a foreign intelligence officer. So where Ms. May came up with that conclusion, I'm not sure. She's never really distinguished herself as a hawk on national security, to say the least. She's not sure we should be in NATO. She thought Han Dong had done nothing wrong that he'd had to answer for. So I was certainly struck by the inconsistency between her reading of the report and what the committee had actually reported. I think Mr. Singh's interpretation certainly rings a lot truer in terms of being consistent with what the committee actually said.
Althea?
So actually, Mr. Singh took back, if you will, some of the impression that he had left after his press conference, that his office wants us all to know that he did not mean to say anything or leave the impression that he was saying anything different than what is actually in the report. And so the whole question about whether or not you feel like there are traitors sitting in the House of Commons, I actually think it's possible that they're both looking at the same information and coming to different conclusions for really not that great, crazy reasons. First of all, Ms. May said that she wanted to know whether or not anybody next to her, like sitting in the chamber, was a traitor. And after reading the report, she felt that no. She did talk about nomination races. So you get the impression that for her, that is less if you are not involved, but you've benefited from foreign interference helping you win your nomination, that you are unwitting or perhaps a beneficiary, but you didn't actively participate in this, that she wouldn't see that as you're being a traitor. And it looks like perhaps that was my takeaway from the press conference, that maybe Mr. Singh actually felt differently. But if you parse the words, the committee in its public report said witting and unwitting, and used the present term. But they could have lumped in former MPs and current MPs, and they both could be right. So the problem is none of us have seen the report, so we don't know.
That is the problem. That is the
right?
central
So,
problem
I mean,
for
it's
us.
possible that there are people, Ms. May left the suggestion hanging there, that there are senators who are currently in the Senate who are witting participants, because she was very clear that she meant, members of the House of Commons.
Okay.
So
go ahead, Chantal, you jump in.
It makes no sense that we are sitting here parsing the thoughts and the words parsed by opposition leaders on such an issue. It's like sitting in a car that is self-driven, and you're just going along for the ride. You don't have a clue what the destination is, and you are not getting any clearer context from the government. It does not help to go to where you will end up. That the leader of the opposition, who stands closest to power, actually is happy to be blind over what happened, whether his caucus is compromised, whether past or present candidates maybe, or whether the lay of the land in Parliament should matter to someone who wants to be Prime Minister. You look at all that together and you think, who in the world are these people who are governing or pretending to want to govern this country, that they engage in this game? I don't think we've ever done analysis on tea leaves that we can't even see.
Generally, you don't like me when I make you do things like that. So go ahead, Andrew.
Well, we should add to that list, the Prime Minister has been sitting on this report for 3 months and has done nothing, said nothing of any note since then. So leaving this to the party leaders, I think the conclusion might be, is not necessarily a very good idea. And yet that's one of the ideas you keep seeing batted about, as if they didn't all have flagrant conflicts of interest in dealing with this, in terms of they may have members of their own parties involved that they'd rather not speak about. So doesn't strike me as a terribly good idea. Yet we keep punting this back and forth now. Leave it to the police. Well, the police can't actually deal with this. Leave it to the party leaders. Well, they don't seem to want to deal with this. Now we're going to give it to the public inquiry, Justice Marie-Josée Hogue. Well, she's got enough on her plate already. She's got an extraordinarily crowded agenda over the next few months, and adding this to the pile may not be the best solution. And I suspect what's going to happen out of this is we're going to keep going round and round the mulberry bush, and nothing's going to get done. So I come back to the idea of, as unsatisfactory a solution as it is of getting the names out, I don't think that's a solution. I think you have to do a lot of other things in terms of due process, et cetera. But I do think nothing's going to happen until you do. I think that's the only way we're going to start to get to the bottom of this, because at that point, nobody can evade it any further.
So what kind of pressure is on Mr. Poilievre, do you think, Althea, at this point, given the way that everyone else is getting the information and talking about it?
Well, his position makes no sense. It really doesn't. If you are serious about wanting to be the Prime Minister of the country and running your party and making sure that nobody sitting in your caucus is compromised, why wouldn't you want to have access to the information that can be available to you? This idea that his hands are tied behind his back and he won't be able to say anything leaves the impression that he's choosing partisan politics over actually leading and taking accountability for things that he could actually change. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about kicking out somebody because the Reform Act ties his hands. That's true, but he could refuse to sign their nomination paper, as we talked about this last week. There are other things he should want to do, how to guard against foreign interference during the Conservative Party's last 3 leadership races. I think that's a really big question mark. And I do feel like, as you know, now Mr. Blanchet, who had not gotten a security clearance, is getting a security clearance, the leader of the Bloc Québécois, and will be reading the report. And perhaps he will shed a little bit more light between Elizabeth May's version of the reading and Jagmeet Singh's version of the reading. But the only person now, only party leader that refuses to read the report and get the clearance for it is the leader of the Conservative Party. That doesn't make any sense, and I do wonder if that position is going to be tenable.
But back to Chantal's point, the government may be doing things legislatively on C-70 and other things, but it has not helped us understand what we're dealing with, or help us understand, help Canadians understand what we're dealing with here either.
Yeah, I mean, the public safety minister keeps on this tired old line about, well, you know, the intelligence can be partial or conflicted, et cetera. That was the job of the committee. These people are not stooges, they're not bumpkins. These are people who've been on this committee for some time. They have, in many cases, backgrounds in law or in law enforcement. So to say that all the work they did going through 33,000 documents can be just waved away because it's uncomfortable for the minister to talk about it, I think is ridiculous.
Last word to you, Chantal, quickly.
The Prime Minister, as was already pointed out, had this report in his hands in March. It has thrown Parliament in kind of a tailspin mood over the past 2 weeks. And yet between March and 2 weeks ago, there has been no sign of much of anything happening from this report. So is Justin Trudeau's take on this the same as Elizabeth May? And if it is, he should say so. And if it isn't, he should say so also.
At issue, the capital gains tax increase. After weeks of refusing to take a position on the Liberals' move, the Conservative leader was forced to respond by a vote, and they voted against it.
Taxing small businesses during an economic growth crisis is economic vandalism.
So how are the Conservatives explaining this move? Let's bring everybody back. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Althea, start us off. After weeks of not knowing what they were going to do, this is where the Conservatives ended up. And the way that they framed the decision was pretty interesting as well. What do you make of what they did here?
I don't think it was entirely surprising. This is long-standing Conservative Party policy. It's where Mr. Poilievre actually, it's the point of view he actually believes in.
Yeah.
And, you know, they have been making, or he has been making that clarion call for the past 3 weeks, telling businesses and people who want him to, you know, change the policy, in any policy, frankly, to make the case. And then if they convince the public, he will side by it. And in a way, that's what we saw in the chamber this week. He talked about this is a tax on doctors in the middle of a doctor shortage. This is a tax on food when, you know, this is not good for our farmers. This is a tax on productivity when we have a productivity problem. And so I think what was even more interesting in the way that he framed it, as in like it will affect regular people and it will affect people that you should care about, is that the Liberals seem completely unprepared for that line of attack. And even when there were questions, good questions, the Conservatives were asking the Liberals, if you say that this is only going to affect a small number of people, then make sure that it only affects a small number of people. The finance minister seemed completely flat-footed and could not defend her policy.
Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, the Liberals thought they had him forked. You know, either he endorses the policy and therefore enrages sections of his base and damages his brand as a tax cutter, or he fights against it and they can paint him as being in favor of the super rich. But that was 2 months ago when the budget came out. And maybe if he'd taken the bait on in the first day, maybe they might have had him in that regard. But a lot's happened since then.
Sure.
The Liberal storyline of this is only going to affect a handful of the super rich is, I think, really broken down. It's broken down under both expert analysis, that it seems to affect a lot more than that. And it certainly, if it were to, it's hard to understand why there'd be so many farmers and lawyers and doctors and small business people who think it's going to apply to them. So that storyline's broken down. But then the other thing he did on the day was he kind of stepped outside the issue. It's not just for or against this particular proposal. And in fact, you'll notice he did not say he would repeal it if he was in office. What he instead said is, I'm going to bring in broad-scale tax reform, or I'm going to strike a tax force. Yeah. And that actually is the right response, which is the policy itself is perfectly sound of let's tax capital gains at the same rate as other types of income. But the larger debate is, should we be taxing income at that level generally, or should we be looking for ways in which we can cut rates? And he's started that discussion off, which I think is much friendlier terrain for him.
Well, he didn't say he would repeal it because it's going to bring in a real huge amount of money, and he's well aware of that too, I'm sure. Chantal?
It's not only that it's going to bring a lot of money federally, it's also going to be bringing a lot of money in provincial coffers, and a lot of premiers are quietly saying thank you. They won't talk about it, but they're certainly not going to join a fight against it. I think the Conservatives at first expected the measure to be in the budget, and because they opposed the budget, they would have voted against it as part of the budget. But if you're going to lay a trap, maybe you shouldn't, show all your cards in the lead up to that trap, as in, come, I'm going to make you fall in a trap, and give you 6 weeks to figure out how to not fall in that trap. And that's exactly what the government allowed the Conservatives to do. Now, over that period, there has been a debate over this measure that the Liberals have not necessarily won. Opinion is split on this. So the issue is, who cares the most about this measure? And if you know anything about taxes, those who will pay or fear that they will pay that tax are much more likely to go vote because they're angry than the people who don't care because it doesn't apply to them. And I'm not sure that the Canadians really believe, especially coming from this government with the kind of brand that it has, trendy, downtown-ish, nice socks, that they see them as fighting a class war for the little guy from the perch of wherever they are. It seems to me like an operation where the government ended up looking, one, fake, two, over the top in its approach, and three, playing games with governance rather than governing.
Andrew.
Well, and their chief spokesman on this, Chrystia Freeland, I have to say, is not a particularly persuasive spokesman. That speech she gave on Sunday, where she said, you know, what kind of country do you want to live in? Do you want to live in gated communities where you're hiding from the wrath of the populace, et cetera, et cetera? It was pretty widely mocked, even by people, I think, who were sympathetic to the issue. So I think that's part of the problem as well.
20 seconds to you, Althea.
It's just strange that they haven't invested really a lot of capital in trying to convince people on the value of their policy. And I understand with some of the changes, it's a little bit hard to explain. But if what they're trying to say is we are an empathetic country, we want to make sure that there are social services for more people, and this is the way we're going to do it. Some of the criticism against the bill, like if you're selling a cottage, for example, and you get this one time in your lifetime windfall, like the government doesn't seem to at all care about some of the criticisms that have emerged. And a lot of the people who are affected, some of them are probably not at all going to be affected, but think they're going to be affected. The government has invested no capital in trying to either fix the problem or assuage their concerns.
At issue, a by-election showdown in the riding of Toronto-St. Paul. Liberal candidate Leslie Church versus Conservative Don Stewart.
We're working very hard to make sure that we win this by-election.
It's seen as a test of support for the Liberals in a stronghold, while polls show low support for the party.
Polls come up and down and all around, and I believe in the man, and I believe in Leslie Church.
So how important is this by-election for the Liberals and the Prime Minister's future? Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Andrew, you sent me a note a few weeks back saying, boy, there's a whole bunch of Conservative signs out and not a lot of Liberal ones. What do you think has to happen here? I mean, obviously the Liberals need to win because it is a stronghold, but how big a deal do you think it is?
Well, you know, by-elections are predictors unless they aren't. You know, I think it was a year or two ago, there was several by-elections which Liberals did rather well in, and we all said, oh, well, you know, maybe they're doing better than we expected, they've got more motivated voters, what have you. And that was shortly before, you know, the Tories opened up a 15, 20-point lead on them. This is a riding which has been Liberal for 30 years or so. It's the kind of riding that used to be accessible to the right Tory candidate, but hasn't been for a long time, even when Stephen Harper was winning majorities, or a majority. So if they were to lose this time, and you know the pollsters that I've seen say it still looks like a narrow Liberal win, but even a narrow Liberal win would not be great. If they were to lose it, that would suggest a whole lot of ridings, not unlike this riding, would be open and available and accessible to Tories in a way they haven't been for a long time.
Chantal.
Sure, a very close result for the Liberals or a defeat would bring a major hit to Liberal morale. I don't know if it would end Justin Trudeau's leadership, but it would certainly encourage some MPs to think about alternative plans for the future. As in, do I really want to go to the slaughterhouse in a general election? Now, if the Liberals expected anything great to be coming from this by-election, they probably wouldn't have picked a date when most of the country is getting ready to disappear for July 1st. I mean, June 24th is about as late in the season as you can do it without burying it in the dog days of summer. So I think they see this as the last of a bad run. I suspect the consequences, if they don't do decently well enough, could be dire for party morale.
Althea.
I think if they lose the riding, Justin Trudeau will have to give serious thought to leaving. There will be people calling him and telling him that he should leave. I think caucus members, I know caucus members will start to mobilize. Whether there's enough of them, I don't think that is still the case, but we will see. It will be the first sign that really some of them who are kind of resigned to the fact that they think they're going to lose in the next election now will think, okay, well, it's not going to be 60 or 70 that survive. It'll be like maybe 30, maybe 25. Because if you recall, St. Paul's is a riding that actually Carolyn Bennett kept in 2011 when Michael Ignatieff had his disastrous election. So she was, a force in the riding. She was a medical doctor. She delivered a lot of babies. Her practice was just outside the riding, but she was very well known. And Leslie Church doesn't have the roots in the riding. No. But because it has become such if he cannot win this, then what can he win? That's the narrative that has set in. It is very important for the Liberals to win it. On the other side, I've heard that Conservatives who have knocked on doors are hearing basically people are not enthralled at all with Pierre Poilievre. They think he's mean, they think he's partisan, but will they hold their nose and vote for him anyways, or will those former Liberals stay home, much like in 2011, and cause some surprising results? I don't know. There may be lessons, frankly, for both political leaders, no matter what happens on the 24th.
This is a riding that is home to the 5th largest Jewish community, based on Elections Canada counting. And based on that, these are motivated voters who could make the difference. And if they do come out to vote based on how they feel today, they're going to give a leg up to the Conservatives. I agree that Pierre Poilievre is not the typical candidate that this riding would be drawn to. But in this instance, if it's going to be a tight race, the Jewish community could make a difference to the outcome.
A lot of doctors and lawyers too, so the capital gains might be in play as well.
True
there
enough.
You go. There you go. Yep. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate what we might talk about the by-election again, but thank you all for doing it for a first kick today and this week. Appreciate it. That is that issue for this week. And I'm Rosemary Barton. Thanks for watching.